Good morning for some of you, good afternoon for me, good evening for my guest today, and welcome back to another episode of We Got This podcast. Now, if you know anything about me, anything about this podcast, you will know that I do have a thing for workplace culture. And I've had it for a number of years. And I was always, even in my project management days, more interested in why and how my teams work and what makes them work well and what makes them potentially encounter challenges and how they overcome those challenges when it comes to it. And for me, it was always about the cultural element. So I was always excited, not just about that, but obviously the wider organization, the wider impact of culture within organizations. And a few years ago, I think it was 7 or 8 years ago, when a lot of HR departments have started rebranding themselves as people and culture departments, I was really, really excited. But very, very quickly, I realized that in many cases, not in all, but in many, it was nothing more than a PR stint. And that's troublesome because obviously there's so much to culture that we can talk about that benefits the organization. And that's why in the last few months, I've been digging a lot deeper into this topic, especially the topic of having a dedicated person responsible for culture, head of culture, or even better, a chief culture officer. And I've been talking to many of them over the past few months, and I'm really excited to have invited a chief culture officer to this episode to join me today. And today I'll be joined by Apoorva Bapna, who is currently the chief culture officer at WPP India, and she is the first CCO at WPP since the role was created in March 2020. And in this role, she's responsible for building an organizational culture founded on openness, optimism, and collaboration. And she also leads the initiatives on sustainability for WPP India. She is responsible for driving diversity and inclusion agenda at WPP India and leads many, many initiatives around that. What we're going to be talking about is what you're going to learn is about the benefits of having a strong organizational culture, but we'll try and go beyond that rather than just talking and trying to convince you about the culture. What we will aim for is to focus more on the day-to-day of what does a culture officer do, what does that look like from the day-to-day, and because in her role, Apoorva is responsible for organizational culture, as I said, founded on optimism and collaboration. And hopefully, you will learn and see the benefits of that. And we'll discuss her role within the organization and the impact it has on the success of the organization as well. Without further ado, Apoorva, welcome to the show.
Thank you so much for having me, Les.
Uh, let's start with the same question that everybody gets. And I don't want you to feel any different. When you were little, who did you want to be when you grew up?
Oh, interesting. I think without trying to sound really philosophical, I don't think I had like this fire in the belly kind of an ambition of what I really wanted to become. I think I was really looking uh, to become like my parents because both of them were working people, and I used to be really, I mean, yeah, it was very inspiring to see them for the kind of work that they were doing, and at that age to see them work quite hard, in areas that would create larger societal impact was very inspiring. So I just think I wanted to be like them, to be honest with you.
Okay, listen, I don't mind you being philosophical at all in the slightest, because we often do use this question as a bit of a segue to different elements of who we are as people, and how often what we do now is not necessarily what we wanted to be when we were little, but has a very, very strong connection, strong impact, and links in one way or another in the nature of what that role stands for, is what often we've seen. Thank you very much for sharing that. Before we go any further, if you don't mind, I'd like to set a bit of context, not just about your role, which is what we're going to talk about later, but about the organization, about WPP. Because if I'm not mistaken, in terms of its size, it's a global organization, and we're talking about number of employees in the thousands. Am I right?
That's right. So it has about 110,000 employees globally, but in India we've got 11,000 employees. We're the top five markets globally for WPP in the global scheme of things. Uh, it's a creative transformation company because while known for its it was only known in the space of advertising and communications, but it's really sort of progressed to make advertising continues to remain the forefront, but there is also a lot of focus on technology, experience, commerce, which are these new areas of business focus for us. And while, of course, these are the strategic business pillars, there is a lot of work happening in this space for the talent, for our people, for our clients, for the communities, and for the planet, and which is what you really see as the larger sort of vision statement for WPP, which is really to help build better future, for our own talent within the organization through the multiple focus areas that we've, sort of brought in as a core focus. A lot of focus on the kind of work that we do for our clients, so that we continue to provide for superlative creative tech solutions to our clients. A lot of work that we do for our communities. The kind of impact that an organization like ours can have on the larger social good is immense, and I think we use that power really in a good way to create that positive impact. Uh, and there are lots of stories around that we can talk about later. And then, of course, the planet, because ultimately we do want to leave a better world for our future generations, given all that's happening with the climate crisis, the kind of pollution in the oceans and the kind of environment damage that it's causing. There's a lot of work happening in that space as well. So I think the company therefore truly is a creative transformation company because of the kind of focus that it's brought in and the different areas of work that we're doing as an organization. And that's pretty much evident in India as well. So those are the kind of areas of work that we focus as a market, pretty much in line with the global strategy of the organization.
Hmm. And in a way, how has the role come about? Because you're as I mentioned, you're the first one in this role at WPP, and I'm curious about kind of what was the motivation, was the thought process behind creating this within the organization.
Sure. So, a bit of a history. So, back in 2018, globally, WPP went through a leadership change. We got a new worldwide CEO. He came in with a lot of focus, not just on business and numbers and financial, but also a lot of focus on people, talent, community, and so on and so forth. And that started getting translated into markets as well. So, in India, when the country structure was being created, and my current CEO, who was the country manager for WPP in India, was when he was creating the structure, he believed that the people and the culture function needed to coexist as two independent functions, right? And the reason the reason I was felt that culture is an important element for us as an organization is because if you look at the workforce across the group, it's a very diverse workforce. There is a huge population of workforce which is under the age of 30, and then there's the remaining workforce which is of course above the age of 30, which makes it a very diverse sort of an organization. And then there were areas that we wanted to focus on to build this workplace as an employer of choice where people would want to come to work, where people would find purpose, where we could give them careers that they could really look at building future here. And I think, therefore, given all of that, there was a reason felt to create a space for a chief culture officer. Of course, we did have a global head of culture as well in the organization at that point in time, but as you would appreciate that, a global role is at a level where it may not be able to focus on markets in a way that it requires depth, and therefore for India, our country manager was very clear that he wanted this role uh, to be created. And I mean, it was beautiful because it was like a blank canvas when I got the role, and literally I could choose to paint it with the colors that made sense for the organization and that made sense, for the business of the organization. And that really was the reason I mean, even today when I talk about the role, I always tell people that I love every day of my job, and that's rare. I mean, it's not easy to love every day of your job. There are days that you like it, there are days that you hate. But honestly, I just love every day of my work.
That's definitely a great place to be. When you said about the blank canvas, I often find that equally scary and equally exciting, depending on the situation. Because often when I need to create something, it's and you're staring at a piece of paper and you don't have that, you know. Um, Inspiration or whatever, something that you know what to put at, that blinking cursor on that screen is probably one of the scariest things that you can experience. I'm glad that you were excited about that, and that you continue to be excited about what you do within the organization. And one of the things that you mentioned is obviously when you started was around 2020. So I'm guessing the first few months of your role were how much were they actually to do with culture and more with helping people through this process, more on the tangible things? I'm guessing infrastructure, policies, working from home and things like that. I'm guessing that's where the
Yeah.
attention went for the first few months, wasn't it?
Absolutely. So I took the role on 1st of March 2020. 17th of March, there was a 21st of March, actually, India declared a national lockdown. We declared it 4 days prior to the national lockdown. This was a global sort of a decision taken. And so 17th of March is when everybody was told to work from home. Conventionally, in our company, work from home is not a regular thing. It was not something people would practice, given the nature of work that we do. Advertising is a very buzzing sort of a space to be in, and you need to be in office, you need to be shooting, you need to be meeting clients, and you need to be servicing, right? So I think the initial few months, there were multiple areas of work that suddenly needed focus on. One was the whole infrastructure part of it. Working from home meant for a lot of for a lot of work, it meant that studios had to be shifted to people's homes so that shoots don't stop. Uh, the bandwidth and the Wi-Fi support had to be impeccable because a lot of people in my company uh, did not have the right kind of facility to work from home because of the backgrounds that they came from, and we needed to make sure that they were able to work smoothly, right? There was also this whole thing around the policy infrastructure because suddenly from not being in office, how do you hold people accountable for what they were supposed to do? How do you keep a track? How do you keep in touch? How do you keep the employee motivation, morale, all of that going, right? So that was one part of the whole work that had to happen. The second part was the pandemic itself. I mean, we had so many people who were getting affected and infected by COVID. In the first 1 year, we had lost about 26 employees to the pandemic in India, which was massive because, again, not expected, not prepared for. So, and the pressure that the medical facilities was going through in the country, we needed to make sure that we were able to provide for our people when they what they needed and when they needed it most. So, a lot of my work around that time was focused on building communities, creating a support group across different agency brands within the network to come together to help people when it came to hospital beds, when it came to oxygen concentrators, when it came to getting medicines, when it came to just giving building knowledge around the pandemic because there was so much of myths and confusion and all of that was happening. So getting doctors, getting support in form of conversations with people, uh, so that access was made available. So my entire, I think, first 8-9 months like was just spent on getting this whole support system in place. Now, one could say that this is not what part of a culture role should be, but in my view, it was because my job was to keep the organization going, to keep people motivated in spite of all the difficult times that we were going through, to provide support and help as and when they needed, and have and a sense of responsibility for our people as leaders of the organization. I think and it was also personally, it was a huge learning curve for me because emotionally it was very hard to go through the phase that we were going through because we all had personal stories, situations at home, but we also had people in the organization to look after and to help them. Um and at the same time, organization also went through the challenge of optimizing their costs, right, and optimizing their staff and relooking at structures, which was also happening parallelly. So I think it was a huge learning curve. It also helped build a great sense of camaraderie and community amongst people. And I always say that while pandemic by itself was horrible, But I think what we learned through the pandemic to become such better people, and I genuinely think that I'm a better person than I was 3 years back, purely because of the grief and everything that I saw around me. And you just learn not to take things for granted, including the
Absolutely.
role that I was doing.
Yeah.
So yeah, for me, sorry, I mean, I know it's a long answer, but that's really, and that set the foundation for what my role was going to be, I think, because it just had me build such huge network and connection in spite of working virtually, because my role was all about people, right? And imagine a culture role being, you have to operate from home without really meeting people in person was very tough. But I think because of the work that we did through the pandemic, uh, I mean, I was just able to connect with so many people across geographies that everything that we did after was easy to do.
Yeah. No, I'm with you. I'm actually as soon as you started answering that question, I've realized I should have phrased that question differently in the first place. Because yes, obviously the first few months of your role were on infrastructure and policies, more kind of I don't want to say hard HR, but on that side. But this, of course, there's a cultural element to that. I don't even know what I was thinking asking that question because when you start talking about how do you create belonging, if this was if you had a remote setup prior to this, it would be a different thing. You had to develop a new way of working for your teams, for everybody that is part of WPP, and obviously, I don't think there's one strict definition of culture. It means different things to different people. In a way, ways of working, that's one definition of culture is how do we do work, and by that, by the how, I don't mean necessarily the tangible stuff but the intangible stuff. I mean, how do we communicate, when do we communicate, how do we support one another, how do we have team bonding exercises, how do we resolve all the difficult stuff that comes up, right? I'm annoyed, I'm frustrated with a colleague, but in reality I'm actually it's because I'm scared because of what's going on, and obviously 2020 has been a difficult year for many people, and I think all of that, how we deal with these situations, how we support one another, that's all linked to culture. That's psychological safety that is obviously being talked about so often. But I like how you said that you've created foundation, and I think individuals, but also organizations, if they didn't just sit around and wait for things to blow over passively, but seeked out opportunities to reinvent themselves, see how things can be better, have, if not created that foundation, at the very least gathered a backpack full of experiences and things that they can reuse in the future. And I think that's very, very important. um, so let's fast forward a few months. Pandemic, obviously, first 9 to 12 months, very tough, focused on that. Uh, what are you focusing on right now, or in the last 12 months after the pandemic, after 2022? What's kind of your focus there with your role?
Um, so, I mean, a couple of core areas that I focus, on my in my work area are around. Firstly, of course, diversity, equity, inclusion, and I'm sure you know, given the Indian context and the overall corporate context, the representation of various groups still remains underrepresented. Women being one of them, LGBTQI being the second one, and then there are, of course, other groups that are not represented enough. So my two sort of focus areas in the last 2 years have been around gender and LGBTQI, and there's been a lot of work that's happened in these 2 years in my organization. Women representation was easier to work on because I think it's also because it's become a conversation across the globe, and everybody talks about women representation much more than the LGBTQI. LGBTQI, again, from an Indian lens, if I were to see it, is still a sort of a it is gaining momentum, but I think the topic itself, there is a lot of lack of awareness in the corporate world even today. A lot of, and I'm being honest, a lot of what happens today is still very tokenistic as opposed to making it as part of the larger strategy. And I think I can say this with confidence that our focus has been to make it strategic and not tokenistic. So I do
Hmm.
not believe in celebrating the month of June and then forgetting about it for the rest of the year and not doing anything. I would rather have a always on strategy on it. And I think that's what we've been focusing
Yeah.
on as one of the sort of pillars that I work on. The second pillar that I work on is learning. Again, given the diversity of my group, we've got about 11,000 people spread across geographies, different stages of evolution when it comes to learning, training, development. So we've tried to create like a common denominator sort of a thing, a base level learning for all our people that we run at a network level, which allows for all 11,000 people to access learning in a way that's easy. And we continue to run that virtual because one of the beauties of this whole pandemic has been that when you do things virtual, you're actually driving more inclusion by allowing for more people to join in. And I think we want to continue doing that in a way.
Mm,
Uh, and the third piece of work that we've been working on is sustainability. But again, I would say there is a intersectionality between sustainability and diversity, equity, inclusion, because a lot of work that we are doing in the larger sustainability, the subset is DEI, because
hmm.
as we all know that it's in fact one of the sustainable development goals. So DEI is a subset of that. Um, so a lot of work on that. I also have, I think one thing that I learned in these last 3 years is the power of communities led, and I do a lot of community led work today. We've got about 5 active communities of people uh, from within the network who actually help drive all these agendas that I spoke to you about. So nothing that I do is in isolation, but it's actually done collectively with support of people. So across the group and across these different communities, I think we would have mobilized close to about 500 to 600 people who work on different areas that I just spoke of. And I think that's what is most gratifying in my role, if I could tell you honestly, because I think the fact that uh, the work we do is not limited to some people, but it's actually broad based and scaled to help and benefit people within the group. And a lot of what we've done in India is actually now seen and taken to other markets as well, which is again
Hmm.
a great way to sort of define success for programs that
Yeah.
we run in India. So yeah, so I think a lot of work on diversity, equity, inclusion, learning, sustainability, purpose, and some bit of work on thought leadership for
Hmm.
the company in India. Those are
Hmm.
some of the core focus areas for me.
The thing that really jumped out at me, and I think this is probably the core of what I would like to talk to you about, because all of the initiatives you mentioned are great, and they're obviously separate podcast episodes in their own rights. Uh, but partially alluding to what I said in the introduction, when we've gone through the HR rebranding PR exercises of them moving to people and culture, but still basically just being the same thing inside, um, and then having somebody who is solely dedicated to culture, what does that mean? Because a lot of people will think, we'll have one post. Because usually, yes, culture is everybody's responsibility. Let's clarify that. Everybody who is part of a group, a community, an organization, whatever, is facilitating, is creating culture for good or for bad. Doesn't matter. They are part of that culture. Um, so it's not that one person can create a culture. No, but one person can impact, inspire, and kind of show the way, the direction. But it's not only on one person's shoulders, not just because everybody contributes to it, but to be able to kind of spread out. And as you said, it's that you've got a lot of quite a few communities, and you realize the power of communities in your role. And I think that's why I'd like us to take this conversation for a little bit. Then how do you go about that? How do you, in your role, make it so that it's not just all on your shoulders, but it's spread throughout the organization and is, as culture is, a living, breathing organism. Could you share a little bit more about that, please?
Sure. For me, and again, this community framework has evolved over time. And the three things that I personally feel really work well in a community setup is ownership, accountability, and celebration. And I'll tell you how this sort of pans out, right? I'll let me do this with an example. So in 2020, through the work that we were doing and talking to people, often I used to hear some of the leaders coming back and telling us that we are losing a lot of women in the workforce purely because this whole work from home has put this added pressure on them because they're expected to look after home, children, and also work, which was getting very hard because when you were coming to office, you shut down your personal life for that many hours and you could focus on what you had to do. But because you were working from home, there was this sort of this work and personal life was getting merged more for women than men. and we were losing a lot of young women because of that added pressure, or a lot of women were coming to say that they were finding it very hard to continue to work, right? And that really got me. I mean, for me personally, it was very heartbreaking to hear that, uh, on one side you're getting time with your family, which otherwise was a rarity given the nature of work that you were in, but it's also becoming difficult for you to be able to do justice to both your personal and professional life. And so I got talking to a couple of senior women, and we said, let's create a community and help such women to actually learn from the conventional wisdom of senior women leaders who've gone through that journey, and to say how can we help them so that they continue to focus on their career and grow while also helping them overcome challenges, right? So we launched the WPP Stella in India, which was actually a global program, but in India we launched it, and we actually we actually relaunched it because in 2018 it was a very small program, but here we thought that we must get into a space where we help solve for a problem that was existing in front of us through the program. And you won't believe, when we launched the program, we were hoping for getting some, maybe 20, 30, at best 40 nominations for the program. uh, in its first year, we actually got about 270 plus nominations for mentees and another 180 nominations for mentors, which we, of course,
Wow.
brought it down to 150 because we couldn't handle so many people, and also that there was a process for selection. So we brought it down to 150. So we got 50 mentors and we got 100 mentees. Now, in my role, I'm an individual contributor. My role, I don't have a team in my role. So for me to run a program at that scale was impossible if I didn't have the support of other women leaders who believed in it. So I tapped into the women who actually had launched the program in 2018, who were still in the company, and these are all very senior women. All in the C-suite sort of roles in the organization. And we created a council of 8 women, and these 8 women actually became responsible for some aspect of the program that they would look after, whether it was the trainings and workshops that we provided to the mentees, whether it was the open houses that we did for the mentors to help solve for any problem or challenge that they were facing, or whether it was to bring in some inspirational speakers to talk to us. And each person owned an activity, which also meant that every time we would come out in the public or we would do anything, it was these women who would be talking about it, showcasing the work that we've done, and everybody sort of co-owned the program. So it wasn't just my program anymore. It was a program that was owned by these 8 very senior women. And over the years, what we've done is that through this group, we've added more people to the council who've been very good mentors and are now ready to take on a leadership role within the community, etc. At every forum that we've gone and spoken about the program, whether internal, external, I've always made sure that we've picked up from this group and they've gone and spoken, as opposed to me going and talking every time. So I think there is accountability, there is ownership, and there's also celebration of what is happening with the program. And I've realized that every time, and this is just one such program, there are many other communities that we run, like the LGBTQI community, etc. We've always opened up the program and let people decide if they feel very passionate about that cause, should they be on the program. And we've also been very clear on what's in it for me, articulating that what's in it for me when you're on a program like this, because you need to be committed, you need to be disciplined, you need to make time, because this is not something you put on your CV on LinkedIn to say that, "Hey, I'm a member of WPP Unite," but it's really about what you do as a result of being the member of WPP Unite. And
Mm,
we've also been fairly, I mean, I can tell you that it may not be the most popular thing that I do, but I've also let go of people who've not demonstrated discipline. If they've missed more than 3 meetings, if they've not committed to mentoring the mentee that they were supposed to mentor for whatever reason, uh, or somebody who's not basically lived up to the commitment that was made at the start. So we've
mm,
also let go, but we've also celebrated who've done really well on the program. So I think that, and of course, being in touch with the community is the other thing. Every community that I run today, I meet them every month as a group. We all come together once every month, so that there is a sense of connection and sharing and learning from each other. So I think those things, I think, work.
yeah, because in a way, you've basically how to put this, you gave people what they wanted but didn't know how to get. I think that's kind of what I got from you from that, from those examples that you shared, that you were surprised with how many people actually came forward. Your expectations were low by comparison, which to
Yeah,
me shows that people have been just waiting for that person, that someone, that initiative, so comes up with that initiative and runs it, and that's why the interest was there. A different kind of example came to my mind is, if you want to test people's commitment and you want to filter out and just have the really committed people on whatever product, whatever project, initiative that your programmer you're running, organize the meetings at a very unconventional and inconvenient time, Saturday morning, for example. And the fact is, people who really want to be there and believe in that they will do everything they can to make that meeting. I'm partly saying that as a joke, but I think the sentiment remains is, if you make it easy, an easy entry point, then it's
yeah,
easy for people to join. But then the commitment might not be there. If it's something that, if something's for free, we don't value it. But put a $10 price tag on it to entry, straight away the people who book, they will kind of think
yeah.
twice. Do I want to go? Do I want to part with that money? Or I don't. Um, I like how you mentioned the parts of how you've gone about this, but um, and I think I might have just answered my own question, but I'm curious, how do you get buy-in from these communities? Because yes, okay, you give them a program, they clearly wanted it, therefore they're engaged, they're involved, they want to run with that. But have you had situations where you actually had to getting buy-in into an initiative from your team? And thank you, by the way, for sharing the fact that you don't have a team under you, that you are an individual contributor technically. Not technically, you are. Um, how do you want to run a program that you believe in, that it's the right thing for the organization, but there's opposition. How do you tackle that? Because I think many people, not just in the role of a chief culture officer, but people who want to make a difference on the cultural front, whatever they are in the organization, might be facing something similar. So I think that would be a useful insight.
Uh, so two ways, right? And of course, there's opposition a lot of times, and opposition may not be as blatant as saying it, but you just create bottlenecks or hurdles, or you don't respond to things when you need them to respond to. Uh, a lot of times, having a conversation, clarifying why you're doing what you're doing, because this whole sense of ignorance or sense of disinterest stems from the fact that you've not really got into the depth of trying to understand why am I doing it, and what's the purpose, what's the benefit that potentially that organization could have as a result of what we're doing. So talking and explaining and uh, using the community people to become the spokesperson to go and talk in their respective agencies has been super helpful, right? Which is a good way of approaching a problem. But a lot of times, also, what happens is that that it's a must do, and you have to do it because largely you've got a buy-in from people. There is a gap in the organization which needs to be plugged in. Therefore, this kind of intervention will help plug the gap. Um, and you're not getting the support that you need sometimes from a certain set of people, you still just go ahead, and you wait for the program to go live, and then once you've had a proof point, or a you've had some achievements, when you go back to that person or to that organization to say that now would you like to now sort of reconsider, or think about what was holding you back, and if this helps you clarify, if this helps, if the conversation helps, etc. We've done that also. And then of course there's sometimes that you just don't, some people just don't want to be on something because they feel strongly, and that's fine, and it's okay for such. I don't think there's any point in forcing or trying to hard sell something to people if they're not interested, uh, because eventually you'll find newer people within that whole space who will believe in it, and they'll sort of become part of it. So I mean, I honestly don't waste too much time now trying to convince people on or if there's a conflict, I try and resolve it up to a point, but I don't think I want to waste too much of my energy doing that, because I'd rather focus still on what's important to me.
it's kind of like the 80-20 rule, isn't it? You kind of focus on the 20% of people that you get 80% of results from, or am I getting it backwards? But I think I'm with you on that. That's a very important piece of insight and wisdom there. Uh, if somebody doesn't want to be convinced, you will not convince them. So you might as well focus on people who want to be convinced or are already convinced, and kind of invest your efforts there. Yes, be inclusive and invite everybody who wants to participate. Yes, but they need to have that initiative within themselves as well. If they might not believe, but at least if they're open to having a conversation, that's great, and we you can then take it beyond that.
Yeah, I just want to
Obviously,
tell you, sorry, I'm interrupting, but there is one, and since you asked this question, there was this person that was going on in my, there's one person in the organization who's constantly uh, ridiculed the title of my role, for example, or what I do, etc. Or sometimes, and that person is close to me or whatever, but from a work perspective, that person has always sort of had a very strong negative view on my job and my role. And I've never fought that back, honestly, because I just feel it's not worth my time or energy to do that, because it is probably that person's insecurity or ignorance that's making her talk the way that she is. And I'm actually saying this in a very spiritual way, but I'm able to shut it down very easily, to not let that bother me. It used to bother me a lot initially when somebody would talk to me like that, but now it just doesn't bother me, because I realize that one person can't really determine the worth of my role on what I do, because there are many others who are out there who feel that there is value in what we do as a company when it comes to culture.
yeah.
So I think that's important. The ability
We
to
could
shut down.
Absolutely. We could get the psychological route here of, what's going on if we do have 20 people believing in us and one person not believing in us, and we focus on trying to convince that one person, confidence, self-image issues and things like that. Psychology, I'll leave that to the side. But an analogy that came to my mind is when you said that you've got one person that's opposing you, is from the movie or the story business. Every hero needs an anti-hero, somebody who will motivate them, push them forwards, push their buttons so that we grow. And I think that might be that person for you. I hope that's that person for you, as
Yeah.
but it's important to remain with a healthy approach to that, and not kind of stressing over that, putting too much emphasis on that and focus on that, but actually saying, okay, this is what this person is showing me, right? They're a mirror for something in me that I can use to grow and develop further. But my focus will be on the people that are inspired by what I do and where I want to take things. You've been in
Yeah,
the role for
absolutely.
a few years now. Um, I'm curious about the vision, the idea, the hope that you had for this role when you started on day one, and where you are today. How does that compare? Does it connect? Is it where you hoped it would be? Is it in a different place, but it's in a great place? Can you tell us a little bit more?
Yeah, so I mean, when I started off, there were a lot of, like I said, while it was a blank canvas, but there was also some strategic areas that we knew we wanted to focus on as an organization, when it came to people and culture alike. Uh, I have done things that I'd never done in my previous professional avatar, to be honest with you, and I got to do it in this role, which was interesting. A lot of it was actually baptism by fire. So I didn't go to a training school to be able to to do this role better. Uh, and the fact that so from sorry, I'm trying not rambling, but basically, uh, if I were to look at the body of work that's got created in these last 3 years, I can tell you that I'm super proud of it. And again, this is not the pride is not just mine alone, but a lot of work that's happened because of the collaboration of people, teams, who've all come together to support and make things happen. I think there's a lot that we've done in the last 3 years. Today, the work that we do has been recognized by our people within the organization, by our people across the organization globally, in the Asia Pacific region. And so much of what we've done is now getting replicated in other markets, like I told you earlier as well. So I think that part really makes me happy and proud of where we are today. I think the role gave me an exposure which I did not anticipate outside of my own company, which has been phenomenal. I work with, for example, there is work that we are doing with UN Women on gender, progressive gender portrayal and advertising. We are working today. I'm working with a very large global organization on sustainability on areas that I did not know of at all. But today I've learned a lot in these last 3 years because of the work that we've done. And I think the sheer love and respect one gets in the organization today, I think to me that's, and for me, I mean, I'm a person with a lot of heart. For me, heart is very important than mind. And I think to me, that's my biggest sort of wealth that I've created in these 3 years. Where people really people want to work together. People want to come and join our communities. People want to create a difference. People are making time in spite of their day's job to be committed to the communities that they've signed up for. We're seeing the change. We are hearing leaders talk, of the work that we are doing. We are hearing employees talk of the work that we are doing. Uh, you know, I mean, again, I'm not being boastful. I won two global awards that I've never won in the last 18 years of my job, a global award, but I won that during in 2022 for the work done in the space of diversity, equity, inclusion. Both global awards, one from Adage, the other from Yahoo Involves. So I think there is a lot. So I didn't plan in terms of where I want to be 3 years down the line when I took the role in 2020. And I'm also not the kind of person like who's very good at answering these questions of, where do you see yourself next and what from, what 5 years from now. I'm not good at all of that. But I think I just wanted to be in a place where I knew that if I look back, did I feel happy about what I did? Did I feel happy about the body of work that got created? And did I feel happy about the kind of uh, the wealth of experience, the wealth of relationships, wealth of uh, uh, the kind of work that got created. I think if I were to look back, I'm super happy and super satisfied with that. But again, I'm not the one to rest on my laurels. I'm sure there is a lot more to do. You've got to feel uncomfortable. You've got to feel like you want to challenge yourself, and so that. And I think the other thing that I just want to say, which is very important, especially when you're in a role which has no where there is no history to the role, right? I mean, it's not like I was taking on the role from someone else. The role of the manager becomes very, very important. If I didn't have a manager, one, of course, who believed in the role, but also who gave me so much of freedom, trust, and respect, all three in equal measures, I don't think I would continue to be in the role that I am in, because if it wasn't for my country manager, and for all the support that he's been through these 3 years, uh, none of what I have done would have happened, because you do need your leader's support to be able to turn things into
Mm,
reality.
yeah,
And he's just been phenomenal in that sense. So
yeah,
I owe a lot of that to him, honestly.
yeah. It's as we said before, it's not an individual role. A lot of people have to focus on this, have to believe in this. I often, when I start work, I might get approached by the head of HR, for example. They are, all hands and feet into this. They want to start yesterday, but then very quickly when we start talking to other senior leaders, the C-suite, the CEO, they're not on the same page. And as much as I love a challenge, unfortunately, in most cases, when especially the CEO is not on board, it's not going to go far, because yes, we can try and convince them and kind of build that conversation and have that process for sure. But if they directly oppose that, it's not going to go very far, because we can do all the work that we want to do, but if it continues to be contradicted directly, or even worse, indirectly, passive way, by not sharing the same values and not beating the same drum, then it's, as I said, it's going to be very difficult, and most often it ends in failure in one way or another. There's always learnings, of course, and changes that happens, but it doesn't have the impact that we set out to. Apoorva, I'm curious. I'm not going to ask you the other question that I was going to ask you about. Where do you see yourself? Where you see that role going? And if you, I'll spare you that after what you mentioned. That's not the favorite question. Fair enough. I don't like these questions either. I started working with intentions recently a lot more. now, and I'm getting better. But I'll spare you that question. But the question, a variation of that question I'd like to ask you is, in the next few months, is there anything in particular that you're really excited about? Any projects that will come to fruition or will see the light of day that you basically can't wait to see?
Yeah, a few of them actually, like and very different from each other. So my first big project is going to be WPP Stream, which is happening in March. This is in its 17th year globally that we are doing this. In India, it's the eighth edition. It's an unconference that we do for 2 days in Jaipur, which is a city near Delhi. And here we, in basically, if I were to give you a parallel, it's almost like a corporate vipassana, where you come, you're in a meditative state for 2.5 days, opening up your mind to a world of possibilities and going back, hopefully with one or two at least big ideas that you really want to take and bring them to life. And the reason and the reason I say this is because of the kind of people we invite to the event. It's a buy invite, so we literally curate every aspect of this, and it's unconference because we let people curate the agenda for us, and therefore the kind of people who come become very important. And there's a good mix of left and right brain in this unconference. I don't know of any other event that happens the way this does, and 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 it's a very very interesting 2.5 days that people get to spend captive in a place. A lot of conversations that happen here uh, stay here, but in a way that, like I said, it's a spectrum. So you get to hear about lots of different areas of work, from technology to culture to creativity to innovation to music to theater to food to culinary to I mean, anything that you can imagine and think about. So that's the one big, and it's open to our clients and our teams, but of course, it's a limited buy invite nomination event. So that's happening from the 2nd to the 4th of March in Jaipur in India. So that's one big thing. The second piece that I'm looking forward to is, like I mentioned to that, one of the focus areas for us has been the whole LGBTQI sensitization and also inclusion at a workplace. We started last year with sensitizing our CEOs and our HR heads on the topic. Uh, this year we are going to scale this up, and the two big things that are planned for. So one is, of course, we're going to train our own people across the board to become trainers on this topic and start delivering sensitization workshops to all our employees across the board, which is 11,000 people. By the year end should have become a certified sort of a participant to an LGBTQI sensitization workshop. We're also encouraging the agencies to start looking at hiring people from this community as more as a strategic thing rather than a tokenistic thing, which I told you earlier as well. And there is a lot of work happening at the policy front, at the infrastructure front for this community. So a lot of what started in 2022 will start seeing the light of the day in 2023. And again, mind you, all this is being done through the community and through a group of people who've come together to
Mm.
own the agenda. So that's the other piece of work I think we'll see a lot of excitement on. And yeah, I mean, then everything else that's happening in the space of gender and sustainability and all of that, which continues to happen, and I think that keeps me and our teams excited for 2023 as well.
I can imagine. It sounds very busy with some big initiatives there, and there's definitely something that's going to go further than just the next 3 months, and probably even beyond this year, even though we're only in January. Apoorva, thank you very much for taking the time. It's been a real joy talking to you, and thank you for sharing some of the insights of what it is like to be a chief culture officer and what that involves. And I think I've learned a couple of things about it, and I hope that the listeners have as well. So thank you very much again for taking the time.
Like, thank you for having me. It was lovely speaking with you today. So thank you once again.
Thank you very much. Uh, before I let everybody else go after this episode, there's a couple of things I wanted to mention. First of all, we have the registration for the next Not Another webinar series workshop open now. And this time it will focus entirely on mastering People Analytics, and will be facilitated by a previous podcast guest, Nick Jested, who is now the Senior Director for BI and Analytics at Cloud Software Group, which was formerly Tipco Software. What makes this workshop different is that it will be hands-on. You will be really getting your hands dirty with this, which basically means that you will get a data set and scenarios that will show you how to make the data work for you, and you will be playing that. So basically, you will be able to discover endless possibilities when it comes to that. What can you do with data? What's available? What's practical insight that you can gain? It's ideal for CHROs, CPOs, HRBPs, or simply anyone who's interested in the use of people analytics to improve employee engagement, retention, performance, and overall creating a culture of data-driven decision making. So it's on February 16th, and the link for registration you'll be able to find in the description. And as always, if you enjoyed this episode and would like to support the show, give those like and share buttons a little tickle so that this episode, what we do here, can reach other people within your network. And you can always subscribe at whatever platform you're using to listen to this podcast. I was your host, Lech Guzowski. Until next time.